Prepare to immerse yourself in the dusty trails and rugged landscapes of the American Old West, where every day could bring a high-stakes gunfight or a daring robbery. In this video, we'll uncover legendary figures who blurred the line between hero and villain, each one forging a reputation in a turbulent frontier, ruled by shifting alliances and sudden violence. From daring outlaws to unyielding lawmen, their stories continue to fascinate, shaped by bold actions, controversial choices, and whispers of conspiracy. Number 1. Curly Bill Brocious. He gained an enduring reputation in frontier lore as a deadly presence in the Arizona Territory, yet surviving documents offer only fragments about his early life. Most historians agree he was likely born around the 1840s or early 1850s, though no definitive birth record has surfaced. Various first-hand accounts hint he was charismatic, but prone to explosive violence when drinking. Court filings from the late 19th century indicate he often aligned himself with gambling houses and ranchers who dabbled in cattle rustling, forming a loose network that occasionally shielded him from immediate arrest. Territorially, southern Arizona was still defining its legal structure, providing ample opportunities for men like Brocious to operate on the edges of society. Contemporary newspaper clippings portray him as both a jovial entertainer at local saloons and a sinister figure quick to draw a revolver. One widely cited episode involved the shooting of a local man during a drunken brawl, but contradictory witnesses complicated attempts to prosecute him. Researchers scanning municipal ledgers discovered that authorities sometimes hesitated to pursue charges, reflecting the precarious nature of justice in unsettled regions. Reports suggest he also had ties to ranchers accused of rebranding stolen livestock, though verifying his exact role remains elusive. Brocious's shocking death centers on conflicting accounts of a nighttime confrontation sometime in early 1882. He and a group of associates reportedly ventured near a remote watering hole. According to certain eyewitness statements, law officers tracked him there, hoping to surprise him during a vulnerable moment. A barrage of gunfire erupted. Some testimonies claim that Brocious died immediately from a fatal shotgun blast to the chest, while others depict him stumbling into the dark before collapsing. Territorial records reflect that no thorough inquest was ever officially recorded, leaving debate about who administered the fatal shot. Fragmentary letters from that period reference multiple participants in the shooting, suggesting the possibility of mistaken identity or even a targeted ambush. Rumors swirled that local ranchers and corrupt officials might have quietly arranged the encounter. Another theory persisted that he survived his wounds, fled the territory, and re-emerged under a new identity. However, the majority view is that Curly Bill's death transpired amid a chaotic gunfight. The fact that his body was not formally laid out in a known cemetery compounds the mystery. Newspaper articles of the time either praised his downfall as justice served, or lamented the abrupt end to a notorious local character. Modern historians, lacking comprehensive documentation, remain divided as to the precise details. The magnitude of the legend rests on how an outlaw with such a formidable reputation simply vanished, leaving behind conflicting depositions and an enduring puzzle. By the 20th century, dime novels recast him as a quintessential villain who personified the violent struggles of the southwestern frontier. The shocking truth is that the question of who delivered the fatal shot, if indeed he died that night at all, continues to inspire debate, reinforcing how easily half-truths and legends become inseparable from historical fact in the Old West. Number 2. Clay Allison. He emerged as one of the most volatile figures in frontier history, known for a hair-trigger temper and an uncanny knack for survival until his sudden demise. Born in 1840 or 1841, accounts vary, he served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. After the war, he drifted into cattle work, drifting through Texas and New Mexico, developing a reputation for unpredictability. Anecdotes recorded by local chroniclers describe how he allegedly once confronted a man in a saloon, then decapitated him in a rage. While some modern researchers suspect the tale might be exaggerated, it underscores the public's perception of him as dangerously impulsive. Court documents related to murder charges repeatedly mention the difficulty of persuading witnesses to testify against him, possibly indicating the intimidation factor he projected, or the fear locals had of retribution. Despite a series of violent incidents, Allison managed to evade long prison terms, benefiting from the scattered judicial framework that made convictions challenging. Detailed glimpses into his character also reveal occasional generosity. For example, depositions mention instances where he helped neighbors in distress, suggesting his nature was not entirely one-dimensional. The shocking truth about his death involves neither a celebrated shootout nor vigilant law enforcement, but a bizarre accident. On July 3, 1887, near Pecos, Texas, Allison was hauling supplies in a wagon. Accounts from local newspapers say his team of horses bolted unexpectedly. In the resulting chaos, he was thrown from the wagon and reportedly crushed beneath one of the wheels. Other versions imply he might have been attempting to control a wild horse when the animal reared. A contemporary doctor's statement confirmed fatal internal injuries. The anticlimactic end stood in stark contrast to the lethal showdowns that had punctuated his life. Some frontier observers found poetic justice in his fate, describing it as nature's way of concluding a violent existence. Others saw it as an eerie demonstration of how the Old West could claim even the toughest gunfighters through mundane misfortune. Modern analysis of local coroner records indicates the incident left little room for speculation. He died on the spot from the crushing force. No sensational inquest followed, and no feud-based conspiracy was alleged. Historians interpret this abrupt finale as revealing the random hazards of frontier living. Clay Allison, famed for outdrawing adversaries, met his demise not in a hail of bullets but in a freak accident on a dusty roadway. The stark disparity between his infamous legacy and his unremarkable end is precisely what stuns many enthusiasts of the Wild West narrative, revealing how unpredictable daily life on the frontier truly was. Number 3. Cherokee Bill. Born Crawford Goldsby in 1876, he embodied a blend of cultural heritages: African American, white, and Cherokee, which allowed him a unique position in the American Indian Territory. While details of his early childhood are scarce, historians have uncovered documents indicating he might have received some formal education, placing him a step above illiterate outlaw stereotypes. Nonetheless, by his late teens, he had embarked on a violent path. He joined up with gangs operating in the territory, orchestrating armed robberies of stores and stagecoaches. Contemporary Pinkerton files from the early 1890s highlight him as particularly dangerous, given his willingness to open fire with minimal provocation. Communities in the territory had precarious law enforcement structures, which helped him evade capture multiple times. In an era when official jurisdiction over Indian territory remained tangled between federal and tribal authorities, fugitives like Cherokee Bill exploited loopholes. Newspaper stories from Fort Smith, Arkansas, describe how local residents dreaded his frequent appearances. One article labeled him the most vicious criminal in the West. The shocking truth about Cherokee Bill's death unfolds from the moment he was finally apprehended in January 1895 after a shootout that left a man dead. Brought to the federal court of Judge Isaac Parker, dubbed the Hanging Judge, he faced swift legal proceedings. Trial transcripts reveal that multiple eyewitnesses placed Bill at the scene of a robbery homicide, refuting his claim of mistaken identity. Found guilty, he was sentenced to hang at Fort Smith. While awaiting execution, he attempted a violent jailbreak, reportedly smuggling a revolver into the jail and taking hostages. This desperate ploy ended in another killing, cementing the public's perception of him as irredeemably brutal. The tension around his impending execution soared. On March 17, 1896, federal marshals carried out the sentence. Newspaper reports from that day describe a stoic Bill who allegedly joked with the hangman before the lever was pulled. Some accounts say his last words were a final taunt toward the marshals, though other sources mention only terse silence. Modern scholars see his final defiance as typical of an outlaw who relished notoriety. The shock lies in how swiftly an individual could ascend from unknown teenager to the region's most feared gunman, then be ushered out of life by a single court ruling. In Cherokee Bill's case, the complexity of his cultural background and the fractious legal territory created a vortex in which violence flourished. His execution stands as a grim testament to how minimal oversight and racially charged tensions shaped the harsh justice of that era. By crossing numerous lines, tribal affiliations, racial categories, and moral boundaries, Cherokee Bill became an embodiment of the chaos swirling through the post-Civil War frontier. Number 4. Black Bart. Unlike the typical gunslinging desperado, Charles E. Bowles, famously known as Black Bart, operated with a style that could almost be called refined. Born in England around 1829, he emigrated to the United States and fought for the Union during the Civil War. After the war, he meandered through mining regions, but ultimately turned to robbing stagecoaches in California and Oregon in the 1870s and early 1880s. Unusual for an outlaw, he left behind cryptic poems at the scene of his heists, mocking Wells Fargo detectives. He also wore a flour sack over his head, cut to reveal only his eyes, earning him a legend as the gentleman bandit, because he rarely used force and never, based on official accounts, fired a shot. Local newspaper columns and diaries from stagecoach drivers often mention his polite manner. He would command them to throw down the box rather than threaten them with immediate violence. This approach was strikingly different from the lethal robberies common on the frontier. The shocking truth about Black Bart's death story actually lies in the debate surrounding his final years after he vanished from public view. In 1883, Wells Fargo detective James Hume and others finally traced Bart's identity through a laundry mark on a handkerchief left at a crime scene. Arrested and convicted, he served over 4 years in San Quentin. Upon his release, he promptly disappeared, fueling rumors that he died incognito somewhere in the wilderness. In reality, scattered records suggest he remained in California briefly before departing under an assumed name. A letter uncovered in the 1890s implies he may have traveled to Marysville or further north, but no conclusive sightings were verified. Rumors abounded. Some said he succumbed to illness, others that he hopped on a steamer to Japan. Wells Fargo agents reportedly attempted to track him, but he was never apprehended for any subsequent robbery. The shocking truth stems from how a famed stagecoach bandit, who confounded lawmen for years, could just vanish from historical record without a sensational shootout or hanging. No official death certificate has been discovered in California or other western states under his known aliases. While certain genealogists claim to have traced him to modest odd jobs in small towns, no compelling evidence confirms these leads. The absence of a violent frontier demise sets Black Bart apart from many contemporaries, whose bloody endings are well documented. Instead, he drifted away, prompting endless speculation. Modern historians sometimes view Bart as an example of the West's unpredictability. Not every criminal concluded their run in a hail of gunfire. His lingering mystery underscores how incomplete the documentary trail can be in 19th century America. In an era obsessed with gunfights, Bart's polite robberies and quiet disappearance remain an anomaly, creating a type of legend all his own. Number 5. Kid Curry. Born Harvey Logan around 1867 in Kentucky, Kid Curry migrated west and quickly established a reputation as one of the most violent enforcers in outlaw circles. Unlike some bandits known for theatrics or minimal casualties, Curry was feared for his willingness to kill lawmen, posse members, or anyone he perceived as a threat. He became affiliated with a gang that targeted banks and trains across Montana, Wyoming, and other states. Period newspapers singled him out as more brutal than many of his contemporaries, crediting him with multiple fatalities. Pinkerton Agency bulletins from the late 1890s flagged him as extremely dangerous and urged any pursuing officers to approach with caution. Court records in places like Great Falls, Montana, reveal that Curry evaded capture multiple times by employing safe houses and forging alliances with local ranchers eager to share in stolen loot. The shocking truth about his death emerges from contradictory accounts of a 1904 altercation near Parachute, Colorado, where he was cornered by a posse after a train robbery. Official reports claim that during the standoff, Curry suffered a serious gunshot wound and, recognizing no escape, committed suicide with a final bullet to his head. Contemporary headlines described the grisly scene, contending that the posse found his body alongside a revolver with a spent cartridge. Nonetheless, rumors soon spread that the deceased man was misidentified and that Curry survived. Some allege that law officers, frustrated by repeated escapes, staged the suicide narrative to end the matter for good. Others argued that the body was too damaged for certain identification. Even the Pinkerton agency had lingering doubts, continuing to investigate suspicious robberies in subsequent years that matched Curry's modus operandi. Modern ballistic tests have been inconclusive because the original evidence, like the bullet recovered and any forensic notes, was poorly preserved. Photographs taken at the scene reportedly disappeared from official archives. This vacuum of proof gave rise to claims that Curry fled to South America or blended into remote parts of the West. Nonetheless, the most widely accepted version remains that he died in that final confrontation, presumably by his own hand. While many outlaws faced hangings or gun battles, Kid Curry's conclusion remains clouded by the possibility of a staged, self-inflicted demise or a case of mistaken identity. The entire episode highlights how the swirling uncertainties of frontier manhunts often left behind more questions than answers. Kid Curry's legend persists partly because of these unresolved doubts, illustrating how fragile the line between a confirmed death and a cunning escape was in the Old West. Whether he genuinely perished in that Colorado shootout or slipped away to reinvent himself, the fact remains that his savage reputation and the puzzle of his end continue to captivate historians and true crime enthusiasts alike. Number 6. Tom Horn. He stands out among frontier personalities because he was at various times a scout, interpreter, lawman, and detective, but ultimately faced a gallows for murder in a highly controversial case. Born in Missouri in 1860, Horn drifted west, finding work as a civilian packer during the Apache Wars. Contemporary military records note that he exhibited remarkable skill tracking renegade bands, leading to short stints as a Pinkerton detective and a range detective for wealthy cattle barons. This role placed him in conflict with rustlers and smaller ranchers, who often accused these big operations of illegal land grabs. Documents from Wyoming and Colorado courts show that Horn was linked to multiple killings, though never conclusively prosecuted, during disputes over livestock. His defenders argue he was a hired enforcer maintaining order in otherwise lawless range conflicts, while his detractors view him as a cold-blooded assassin who executed threats to his employer's interests. The shocking truth about his death involves the 1901 murder of 14-year-old Willie Nickel near Iron Mountain, Wyoming. Investigators claimed Horn confessed while intoxicated, though the alleged confession was neither recorded nor witnessed by disinterested parties. The trial, presided over by a judge who faced public pressure to reduce vigilantism, ended with Horn's conviction. Yet significant inconsistencies plagued the proceedings. Ballistic evidence on the bullet recovered from the victim was inconclusive. Multiple witnesses recanted or contradicted themselves, and the state's star witness had questionable motives. Historians combing through transcripts highlight the role of local politics, as prominent cattlemen disavowed Horn in order to distance themselves from negative publicity. On November 20th, 1903, Tom Horn was hanged in Cheyenne, Wyoming, an event widely covered by newspapers from Denver to New York. Letters written from Horn's jail cell express bewilderment at being held accountable for a crime he insisted he did not commit. He maintained that his remark about killing the boy had been taken out of context. Some local supporters, outraged by what they saw as a botched trial, demanded a posthumous pardon. Over a century later, legal scholars and amateur detectives continue to dissect the evidence. Forensic re-examinations using modern ballistic comparisons have yielded inconclusive results. A few writers argue that Horn was framed by rivals, or that the real shooter took advantage of Horn's intimidating reputation to shift blame. In 1993, a mock retrial was organized in Wyoming with modern legal standards, ending in an acquittal, a symbolic gesture that further fueled controversy over the original verdict. Regardless of whether Tom Horn truly killed Willie Nickel, his hanging stands as one of the most divisive deaths in Western history. The shock lies in how an individual recognized for his formidable tracking and detective work could so easily become entangled in a questionable conviction, culminating in execution. It underscores how the Old West, already rife with political tensions, lacked reliable investigative processes. leaving the ultimate truth of such crimes murky. Tom Horn's tragic final chapter epitomizes the lethal interplay of power, suspicion, and vigilante justice in frontier society. His story remains a cautionary tale of how swiftly a once-respected figure can become the scapegoat for broader societal fears, leading to a grim finality on the gallows.